tonight, and this is a very special night, as will be obvious further on in the agenda. Our clerk tonight is Ms. Sheila Gurry. The question period sign-up sheet is on the partition wall near the gallery. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, would you please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet? And at the start of question period, I will call up those who've signed up to the podium to address council on that issue. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, Ms. Gurry, and we have quite a few tonight.
Yes, and even more so. Thank you, Your Worship. So please bear with me, Council. I have a couple that just came at me, so I'll try to remember them all as I get there. So for agenda item 10N, rezoning application number RA422 at 111 Terminal Avenue, we're adding a delegation from Daniel Reddy, Cannabis Stores Company. For agenda item 10F, development permit application number DP1070 at 591 Bradley Street, we're adding delegations from Jean Playden, the owners at Strata Plan VIS 3635, Park Ridge Strata Corporation, and Raymond DeBeeld from Raymond DeBeeld Architects Incorporated. For agenda item 10C, proposed pilot sites for unmanned aerial vehicles in parks, we are making the following changes, and the first is to the title. The regulations actually have been changed, and so the title will be amended to be remotely piloted aircraft systems rather than unmanned. And we are adding, we're changing attachment B, C, and adding a new attachment C and a new attachment B. So it's all there in your new merged agenda. As well, just a little error for item 10G. I believe the variant says that it is 16.6 and it should say 16.62. I believe that was the change under the increase of the maximum building height from 14 meters to 16.6. It's just a minor little change there. And I think that's it, except that Councillor Hemmens will be adding a motion under notice of motion this evening. Wait, I think I forgot one more. Oh, Your Worship, I'm sorry, I forgot a delegation for 10H, Kyle Schick. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. A motion for approval of the agenda as amended. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Motion carried. A motion for the adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved, Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favour? Motion carried. The next item is the Mayor's report. I just want to report on one item in particular. It's annual Bike to Work Week in school. Go by Bike Commuter Challenge events are gearing up for another year. Obviously, the spring Go by Bike starts today, and the Commuter Challenge will be starting on June the 2nd. Each event runs for a week with various events and activities throughout the city. The strategic link is Bike to Work in School, Go by Bike, and Commuter Challenge events support healthy and sustainable mobility within our city. I want to emphasize that there are two bikes here, not just for prop purposes, but we have councillors who actually ride their bikes to work, and they are to be commended for setting an example for the rest of us in the city. We are hoping, obviously, to double active transportation trips in our city by 2041, and perhaps sooner if we're lucky. Now, as many of you will note tonight, we have a special table set up in the front of the council table. We have some documents that are going to be signed here later tonight, and I presume we have those present and available. Oh my. Gurry.
Your Worship, I actually did not receive them from
I trust our friends will be bringing them with them then.
Yes, I hope they do.
At this point, I'm going to rise for a moment and welcome the Chief and Council of the Namick First Nation to our chamber.
see you, Reagan, again. Joe.
Well, this is one of those wonderful moments that also has a humorous side to it and shows that even in the best organized lives, things don't always go well. I am delighted to welcome to this chamber tonight Chief Mike Wise and members of his council. And for the sake of the record, I want to read in the names of all the council members, even though they aren't all here tonight. Councillor Chris Good, well, raise your hands, of course, so the audience knows who you are while you're here. But Councillor Chris Good, Councillor Kate Good, Councillor Emmy Manson, Councillor Regan Seward, Councillor Isaac Thomas, Councillor Erilyn Thomas, Councillor Doug White II, Councillor Douglas White III, Councillor Joe White Jr., and Councillor Paul Wise Seward. Earlier today, in the Longhouse at Snuneymuxw First Nation, I won't call it an historic event, but it was a very important event for all of us who've been working hard as a new council and with members of Snuneymuxw Council and Chief Wise. We had an opportunity to sign a renewed and revised protocol working agreement. It is an important step forward in reconciliation for this community with its First Nations, the people who have occupied this land since time immemorial, long before any of us or our ancestors came here. And they welcomed our ancestors here. And the history of that is complex, and we can't go back and fix all of the issues that arise from that complex history. But we can move forward, and there is a great willingness to do so. And it was the signing of that agreement today, which we don't happen to have in front of us and available now, which we had planned to sign tonight, which we signed 2 copies of earlier today, that we're here to commemorate and acknowledge and to welcome the Snuneymuxw Council to be here tonight with the Nanaimo City Council on this most important occasion. So if the good news is we don't have any pens either out front and we don't have agreements to sign. So let's just say this is what one calls a political embarrassment of sorts. However, we won't make that mistake again. But I'm now going to call on Chief Wise to speak on behalf of his people. And I think the shared sense of significance it is for all of us to be here tonight on this occasion to honor what happened earlier today and to respect the tremendous welcome and the great hospitality received by Nanaimo City Council and many leaders of this community, of both the Snuneymuxw First Nation and the city in general, community leaders, educational leaders, and what it meant for all of us to be there and participate. So without further ado, could you please give a welcoming round of applause to Chief Wise and his council.
Siam na siya at the pacham tsilam tanit Snuneymuxw Haitsapka. Mayor and your council, thank you for giving us this time this evening to come and share in this day that we brought forward today. Very exciting day for our 2 governments coming together and putting a document forward where we're going to work together moving towards the future. We're very excited as a government to government moving forward. So we thank you all for giving us this time this evening, and we look forward to the future working together, Snuneymuxw and the city of Nanaimo. So we're very excited on behalf of the Snuneymuxw Mistayokh. We want to thank you once again for coming forward and with a good heart and a good mind to move forward together. So I raise my hands to each and every one of you for coming together today, and we look forward to the future of working together. So with that, I want to thank you and your council again. Heights up. It was siam na siya. Let's go.
With that, I want to thank the Chief and Council again for coming out tonight. It was important for us as a council that we do this in the presence of this chamber as well as at the Longhouse earlier today, to recognize the importance and the significance of this as we move forward down a road to reconciliation. As I said to the Chief last week, I think we're at a stage in our relationship where we acknowledge fully there will be bumps on the road, but we're not getting off the road. As his late mother said it so eloquently some years ago, We're here together, and we're going to be here together for a long time. Aichikasiam.
Your Worship? Your Worship? Your Worship, before you all leave, would you mind actually, first I'd like to say I'm very sorry, yes, that logistically we missed getting the actual documents here for you to sign. But in absence of that, and I truly do apologize, would we be able to get a picture of you around the table? That would be really wonderful. And again, I'm very, truly sorry.
The chief and I, out of respect to his age, his status and my age, are going to sit. Thank you.
Paul, great to see you. See you again soon, I hope. Very good. Take care. Thank you. Chief, thanks for coming.
Beyond words. The next item is GURI. Present delegations, we have none other than those that are already scheduled for the various items on the agenda. I would like a motion for the adoption of the consent items. There are a number of them.
So moved.
Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor?
Ms. Gurry,
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry, this is one of the late items that I missed. Removing, Council Gesselbrock would like to consider the consent item under 2.1, which is that it was moved and seconded that the Governance and Priorities Committee recommend council add the following action item under environmental responsibility, and that is, if requested, the City of Nanaimo work with the Regional District of Nanaimo to develop food security for the region. So Councillor Gesselbrock would like that considered after the rest of the consent items.
All right. Can we have the vote then on the items that are still by consent? All those in favor? Motion carried. Councillor Gesselbrock?
thank you, Your Worship. I would like to amend that amendment to read, if requested, the City of Nanaimo work with the Regional District of Nanaimo and community organizations to develop food security in the region.
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? Councillor Himmons?
Thank you. I'd just like to ask Councillor Gesselbrock to tell us a little bit more about the change and why.
I think that food security is a very important issue. It's within our OCP. It's also in the Community Sustainability Action Plan. The RDN does play a large role. They have the agricultural area plan where food security and measures to promote it are there. A lot of movement hasn't been on that plan in a while, and in Nanaimo we have a lot of organizations working on the issue of food security, and I would like to have it say in our strategic plan that we will help with the initiative of the community to help move these initiatives forward if they should be brought forward. And just
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Council Gesselbrock, does that include just not-for-profits or for-profit as well?
Community organizations.
community organizations, I would imagine both, depending on what the proposal is, and that we'd sit down and work together.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Opposed, Councillor Turley. And on to reports. The first is yours, Ms. Gurry. Publishing of public hearings.
Thank you, Worship. So this item has come up with council, and they requested that staff look into options around video recording and publishing of public hearings. Staff did some research, and what we have found is in the report that is attached to your agenda, and staff is looking for direction regarding how to proceed with either video recording or not of publishing of public hearings.
Councillor Bonner. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thorpe. I didn't look over fast enough.
Got to look to your left.
Am I right, actually?
Oh, you're right, sorry. My left. The other way. Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to put a motion on the floor so that we could speak to it.
Please.
And my motion would be option number 2 as suggested in the staff report, which reads that council directs staff to maintain the status quo and continue to not record or publish public hearings. I'll speak to that if there's a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your
Councillor
Worship.
Thorpe.
Thank you. Having read the staff report and also some legal advice on this issue, I'm not inclined to change our current policy. I think there are some severe and serious privacy issues involved attached to this. And I would just point out that although we're certainly in favor of transparency in our operation of local government, a public hearing is not council debating. A public hearing is council listening to citizens. And when citizens come in front of us, they are required to give their name and the address. Sometimes that's a bit intimidating. I think it would be much worse if they knew they were being recorded. So I don't see the need for this. It's not something that I've heard from the community that they wish. We are certainly live streaming our council meetings, and I think that's one thing, but a public hearing is something quite different. It's a legal process involving the citizens. So for those reasons, I would put forward the motion that I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Oh, thank you, Worship. I was actually going to put a different motion on, so I'll give my view of why I would oppose this motion. I think that it's part of a democracy of being open and transparent. I don't know of any example or anyone who said someone actually came forward and said, I do not wish to speak on a matter because I'm afraid to speak in front of council. We have people who will be appearing for us today. They will be speaking in front of council. They will be giving their opinions, and they will be recorded. And I think this is just another move along that same line. At the very least, we should be streaming our meetings that we have after the public hearing, which would be where we do actually debate in council and make decisions, which we are presently not doing. So I would be voting against this motion. I believe it's not where we should be going in terms of transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be voting for the motion. I think because of the legal implications, the FOIPA issues, as well as storage and the cost associated with that, and the ATIP requests, I think it's going to put an undue burden on staff. I do agree with what Councillor Bonner said, though I would not have an issue with the part where council debates, but I certainly have an issue with private citizens being put on tape without prior written consent, as is required by the law. So I will be voting in favor of this motion.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. As Councillor Armstrong just stated, and other councillors have stated, public hearings are a little bit different in nature. they can have a little bit more of a personal tone because it's impacting either neighborhoods, businesses, etc. When the public is speaking, I think they should have the right to know that they can come and they're not necessarily being recorded in case that intimidates them. But what I definitely want to see is a meeting where council actually debates the topic. That should be streamlined, especially in case of councillors that may have an open mind and may change their opinions during the debate. I think the public should have the right to know why they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Himmons.
Thank you. I will be voting in opposition to this motion. I agree with Councillor Bonner that this is a key piece of democracy. I think folks who have the bravery to come to the podium and address 9 of us have the bravery to also be recorded. I believe staff in their report have outlined jurisdictions, municipalities who are already doing this and how they get around the FOIPA issues. It seems fairly straightforward to me. I also agree with my fellow councillors that really the meat of a public hearing is the conversation often that takes place afterwards, in which the council weighs the information that they've been given and makes decisions on that. So that is truly the piece I would like to protect through video. However, it seems to me that they are lumped together, and so I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Ms. Goury.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide a little bit history background around some of the comments and discussion taking place. The third readings happen in the special council meeting that surrounds the public hearings, and this wasn't always the case. This happened I'd say about 5 years or so ago, and the third readings were added after the close of the public hearing, with it kind of an agreement amongst councillors. If there was needed more time to think about it, it would be forwarded to the next council meeting so that you could have that discussion and debate. However, to expedite some development processes, that third reading happening that evening might help with those speeding up of issues. However, with speaking with Mr. Lindsay, it really makes very little difference in a 7-month process for development permits or rezoning application processes. Sorry about that. He was supposed to be here to speak to this. So it has made very little difference. So that is still and always has been an option for council to postpone the actual third reading until the next council meeting. So that portion could not be dealt with, and that debate could be heard at a council meeting. The other point that you don't hear about very often from your side of things, and I'm not sure if it was mentioned in the report, but we do have times when individuals request that their personal information be removed from minutes, reports, or agendas that have been previously published. We stopped doing the practice of recording names and addresses, in normal council meetings, but sometimes, and it really helps council weigh the decision of the person speaking at the podium to know what their address is. If they're a neighbor relevant to the property under discussion, obviously their opinion matters more than those that aren't. So we do, and council has asked for their name and addresses prior to them speaking. So that process would have to change, and that's one of the processes that would have to change in order to meet the privacy legislation, because taking those information offline afterwards is costly, expensive, and sometimes out of our hands. We've had to request Google remove it from Google, and they don't have to. They can just try to comply with our request when we have had it. And in fact, today we have just had a request for removal of somebody's name and information from Board of Variance documents. And sometimes for security or personal reasons, they will request this of us. And when we can, we have to try at least to comply. So that is just some context behind some of the information that you've been discussing.
Thank you, Ms. Goury. Councillor Himmons again.
Thank you. A question for staff. If we vote in favor of this motion as it stands, does that preclude us from then recording and broadcasting the meeting afterwards? Because I'd just like to be clear with those in the audience and those watching that for me this really kind of this really became clear during a recent kind of a controversial decision whereby council was really asked to weigh the information given, and there were a lot of values expressed, and I think that the conversation that followed the public hearing portion is what I find most valuable and what I would really like to see the public have access to, because it really tells you who we are and how we make our decisions, and I think that's really important. So my question is, can they be separated, and can I then perhaps move to have meetings immediately following public hearings to be recorded and broadcasted?
So, Your Worship, just in response to that, there's a couple options. One would be that we could try to separate it, so have the meeting open on video, recess for the public hearing portion, and then reopen. But another suggestion that staff had that was just to stop doing the third readings at those meetings. They provide a little benefit, and then they could be moved to the council meeting to be debated and discussed then. So that's a process that's not mandatory for council to do. It was just implemented some years ago, and it doesn't need to be there. And often has been the case that council has decided not to do the third reading that night. They want to sit on the information they've heard that evening and have the discussion at the next council meeting. So those are some alternative options. If the motion on the floor fails, council could consider some of those alternatives.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. I have listened to the debate tonight and have been considering this question since it was first raised. We make choices about what we choose to expend public monies on and what are priorities for us and what are important. And I must say, the proponent, and I will call him the proponent, someone who has written on this issue, perhaps surprisingly for me, makes the best argument for why it's not necessary to do this. And I'm going to read from something he had to say. I left the meeting knowing that the vote for rezoning had been lost. Imagine my surprise when looking for a video of the rest of the meeting the next day. One could not be found. What I found was that despite years of video records of council meetings, there was no video record of public hearings, which would allow me to discover the alchemy which had changed at least one councillor's mind, and to determine how this could happen, as what I heard before leaving was clearly a voting situation. Another line and then says this situation should be fixed and soon. And I guess my position is this: it is a public hearing in this public forum where the public is welcome to attend, and does, just as the public has chosen to attend tonight. There will be added costs. As far as I'm aware from reports from staff and my sense from others is that this as an issue has only been raised by one individual. And as much as I appreciate the enormous interest they take in the public process and this process, the fact that they themselves acknowledged that they weren't aware that this was what was happening tells me it's not a public issue. And if it's not a public issue, I am simply not prepared on a practical basis to authorize what amounts to the expenditure of further public funds, how small that amount may be, to solve or provide a solution for a problem which, with great respect, in my mind, does not exist. It's not as if these meetings are secret. It's not as if the doors are locked. It's not as if the public can't and doesn't frequently attend public hearings. And indeed, on balance, if it is positioned as a question of transparency and openness versus the possibility that a neighbor is going to be intimidated in attending a hearing because they're going to have to be speaking against their neighbor's interests, is already an enormously difficult proposition. Those of us who sit around this table are somewhat used to public speaking, and perhaps indeed quite comfortable with and may even enjoy it, but that is not true for every person. And so anything that in my mind makes it even more problematic or difficult or might tend to or appear to intimidate individuals coming before this council to express their views in a public hearing, I think outweighs any public advantage that may be gained by the issue of transparency or having these kinds of meetings recorded, as I say, particularly when it appears someone who I respect and who follows council closely wasn't even aware that they weren't recorded. That, to me, makes the argument settled. Councillor Gesselbrock, I see you've added yourself to the list, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe strongly that the debate portion of the third reading should be recorded. It's just accessibility. Not everybody can make it here to the council chambers, and we record everything else, and that should be made available publicly. I'm not convinced that recording a public hearing is going to deter individuals from coming to speak to the podium. I think if you make it here to the council meeting in front of council and everybody in attendance, being recorded is not a major concern. I'm not overly attached to seeing it being recorded or not recorded, the public hearing portion. However, the cost is relatively negligible, so I don't see that as a huge barrier. So I'm inclined to be supportive of having the whole public process video recorded, so I won't be supporting the motion.
Any further discussion? And the motion is to do nothing, essentially. All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Motion carries. Yes, I think so. Ms. Gurry, Councillor Hemmons wishes to make a motion now respecting.
Thank you. A process
Alternative?
question, Ms. Gurry. Would now be an appropriate time to make a motion to defer third reading and debate until the following council meeting to ensure that it's recorded?
Your Worship, I'm just going to actually ask Mr. Lindsay if he could assist me with answering this. I don't think a motion would actually be necessary. I think council could just do that at the meeting, or should we, from a process, just discontinue that?
I think, again, it depends on council's intent. If it's to simply require that every application be considered at the next council meeting and not on the night of the public hearing, then yes, I think a motion would be appropriate. If the intent, as the clerk is suggesting, that you could leave the process in place and evaluate each application on its own merits at the night of the hearing, then I don't think an amendment would be required.
Thank you. A follow-up, if I may, then I would, given that information, it seems pertinent that not every third reading is highly contentious and there isn't a lot of debate. So if it's council's discretion, I would just request that for those conversations that are somewhat contentious and where people really are expressing their values around a certain development, that we defer those to the following meeting to ensure that they're protected for people's viewing. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Martman, you wish to say
Thank
something?
you. Yes, I was wondering if I, through you, could ask a question to staff. Is it as simple as at a public hearing, after the public hearing is completed, and if we decided as a council to debate, is it as easy as flicking a switch into streamlining us?
Thank you, Worship. Not that simple. We would have to have the motion, have the process in hand, start the meeting, and then recess it for the public hearing, then come back and unrecess it after the end of the public hearing. So it's more than that, and we would also have to have, the cost would be for the entire meeting,
Okay, thank you.
because we would have to have that support.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. And similar along those veins, my question, the controversial subjects sometimes is a subjective call, and what may be controversial with some person may not be to somebody else. And so I just think that in the event that we do continue on to third reading, we should be broadcasting it. It should be recorded and it should be streamed for the general public to watch. So my idea here is that we are ready in the event that we decide at a particular public hearing. We only have them once a month. We'll probably know in theory how it's going to go at the end of the meeting, that we may proceed to third reading, that we would just arrange to have the video folks there. It's $45 an hour. Public meetings don't take that long generally. I just think in the interest of transparency, democracy, which is never pretty, never cheap, that's not a lot of money to spend.
And I'm going to suggest that in light of the fact we have no motion before us and we have a very long agenda tonight, if someone at some future date wishes to make a motion and consider this issue more carefully, that would probably be the appropriate time to do so. as opposed to tonight when we have taken a vote on the issue and the staff report before us. And unless I hear great objections from somebody, I'm going to suggest we move on to item B, which is the deaccessioning of the public art piece, The Frame by Jason Gress, to be introduced by Mr. Harding. Seeing no objections, let's move forward. Mr. Harding, please.
Your Worship. I did.
You are now.
Thank you, Worship. Just as is a public process when we dedicate public art, when it's also important when we formally remove public art that we go in front of council also, because council approves the dedication of public art, and also there's a deaccessioning process for the park. So this is a piece of art that unfortunately had to be removed over a year ago, but we need to get in front of you to do this formal process as it is part of the public art plan for public art. So our motion in front of you, our recommendation of council is that council approve the deaccessioning of the public art piece, The Frame by Jason Gress from the City of Nanaimo Public Art Collection.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I move the motion.
Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. I might say for the record, though, that that is probably one of the most popular pieces of public art, and I hope that there may be some opportunity to create a similar opportunity for visitors to the community to be photographed in the most beautiful harbor in the west coast of North America. No prejudice or bias intended. The next item is proposed pilot sites for and I'm going to have to change the wording, uncrewed, remotely piloted vehicles in parks. Mr. Harding. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. Turn myself off. I had a question right after that is the staff is, can we not just commission one of these things to be built out of aluminum, painted really nice and stuck back up there?
Mr. Harding.
Then that would not be a public art process.
And I'm fine with that. I don't think the public cared whether or not it was a public art piece. It's just that there was a really nice frame there and people could get their picture taken. So that's I would like to see that. And I will come forward at another time with a motion.
I'm sure everyone is listening too. Mr. Harding, please.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, the name change on the report is from unmanned aerial vehicles in parks to remotely piloted aircraft systems. And I want to thank Councillor Brown for prompting me to check out the regulations, see if there has a change. And sure enough, 4 months ago, they changed the name. So thank you, Councillor Brown. So the report in front of you is we wanted to try 2 pilot sites this year. For a number of years, we've been working with flyers to find different places for them to be housed or to utilize. And so over a year or so of working with them and trying some different sites, our suggestion today is 2 locations, and we can go through those in a few moments. 2 locations for a pilot project for a year. One is for fixed wings at Roxman Sports Fields, and the other is for drones and drone racing at Elaine Hamilton Layfields. Details are outlined in the report. I can go through other details if council desires, but I know you also have some delegations regarding the pilot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. Is it Leo Catilla or Tila? One of the delegations, please come forward. And if I've mispronounced your name, tell me.
You're pretty close.
Pretty close is not good enough in pronunciation, correct me.
Are we ready? Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I thought I knew exactly what I was going to say, but I forgot it already. My time is rather limited, so I want to emphasize 3 points, and I'll start on the first one right away. There are thousands of these UAVs in Nanaimo, hundreds under the Christmas tree every year in the past, and going forward it will be the same. And folks that get them will fly them. Young and old, they'll be flown on their front lawns and the streets in front of their houses, public parks, public school grounds, and in every case, these are illegal. None of them are in compliance. And some of these recipients and owners of these new UAVs will probably be quite competent. Others, not so much so. and others, probably fair to say, will be rank amateurs and will actually, these things are dangerous in their hands. These things, they have a very powerful lithium-ion battery driving carbon fiber propellers at high speeds, and in careless or unskilled hands are dangerous. I'll relate an incident that I personally saw at Harry Whipper Field about 5 or 6 years ago. My grandson was playing soccer with 22 others, 9-year-olds. Suddenly, a UAV appears in the sky above us, and he's there for 4 or 5 minutes, hovering and flying around as low as 20 feet above all these kids. Incredibly dangerous practice. And what we're proposing is a regulated. What we've got right now is the Wild West. They're flying these things all over, and lots of the pilots are unskilled. What we're proposing is a regulated, rules-based environment where safety is at the core of all of our rules. We would have instructors so that if, say, a new owner of a UAV arrived at the flying site, he would have to demonstrate in front of our instructors or qualified flyers that he or she is capable of flying these things safely and taking them off and landing them with no difficulty. If they're not able to demonstrate that, they have to then fly with an instructor until they are capable of flying. So my first point that I want to emphasize is that we're going from the Wild West to a regulated, rules-based, safety-oriented flying environment. The second point I want to emphasize is that every club member will have to belong to the national organization. I refer to the Model Aeronautics Association of Canada. One of the benefits of membership in that organization is that every flyer will be covered by $7 million of liability insurance. And some may say, well, it's covered in my homeowner's policy. Well, it was at one point, but more and more so, the newer homeowner policies have explicit writing in them that excludes UAVs from liability. So $7 million of liability insurance is my second point I want to emphasize. And the third is that in every case, flyers in our club that have the MAC, that's the acronym for the national organization, have the MAC membership, will be flying in full compliance with all requirements of Transport Canada. Requirements that exist today, but also requirements that are rules that have yet to be announced.
1 minute left, sir, please.
I beg your pardon?
1 minute left.
Well, I'm completed. Thank you very much for being a good audience, and good evening. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Yes, thank you. Councillor
I
Armstrong.
think the mics are off again. I can talk loud. I do have a question about the map. So you mentioned about how younger kids will get these under the trees. Would that be
I
like
beg your pardon? I didn't get
You mentioned how there will be younger people getting these under trees.
Yes.
Would this be also like a role of a mentorship for some younger people whose parents would not be able to help, or fathers? Like, would younger people be allowed to join the MAC?
Anyone can join MAC, that's correct.
So there's no age restriction?
No, there isn't.
So you guys could be mentorship then for some of these younger kids, right, whose parents can't?
Well, I think the next speaker is the MAC
Okay,
representative
thank you.
for the area, and I would defer
Awesome.
that question to him.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm having some technical difficulties, so if anyone else has a question of this particular delegation, no, then we'll thank you so much. Mr. William Rollins, next delegation.
Yeah, so it's mine. Okay, it's the new fact of life in here.
It was on, and then it went off.
Mr.
Good evening,
Rollins.
ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for
much.
hearing us.
5 minutes, and at the 4, the light will change to orange.
I'm very deaf.
5 minutes, and at 4 minutes in, the light will change to orange.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is William Rollins. I represent Model Aeronautics Association of Canada. I'm a deputy zone director now. I come here to kind of explain what MAC is and what our relationship is to Transport Canada. I've made some notes here. I feel like I usually could talk okay in the public, but like I never had people behind me. I
don't
want
like
to turn
that.
around, you guys, sorry, but the Model Aeronautic Association of Canada is a national not-for-profit organization that was founded in 1949 to promote model aviation throughout Canada. We have grown to approximately 12,000 members over the years. MAC is a volunteer-driven organization. From the membership up to we have a board of directors, and MAC is recognized by both the Aero Club of Canada and the Federal Aeronautics International as the governing body for model aeronautics in Canada. Our organization has over 30 standing committees that work tirelessly to get things done for our organization, and over 200 members that are volunteers doing that work. We have 6 advisory groups that volunteers approved by the board of directors because of the professional backgrounds and the willingness to give back to our hobby. 2 of which work directly with the government of Canada. One is the Radio Advisory Board, and they sit on a council that decides what the frequency use for all frequencies in Canada. We're a member of that. And they sit there with businesses and they all decide what radio frequency is going to be used for. The other group is Transport Canada, and we have a group that sits there with those guys talking about all the rules, regulations, and we've been very involved in that for the last 3 years or so. The overwhelming decisions that they made about giving MAC an exemption for these new transport rules that come into effect in June the 1st was the history of MAC and the organization, how we deal with rules, regulations, and a safety record. Over 70 years we've existed, and we've never had an accident anywhere with a flying full-scale aircraft. Now, we have had an airplane on the ground, but that was in an air show, and there was nobody near it. That's about all I have really to say. Transport Canada, basically, MAC has had such a good safety record over the years that they've given us that exemption. And they trust us to look at the sites, make sure that they're safe, put restrictions on heights that you could fly, depending on airspace, regs and stuff. So that's what we do. So that's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Rollins. Any questions from council? Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, just my question that I'd asked earlier. So could this be used as a mentorship for younger kids to help when, their parent might not be able to do it?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Armstrong, you said?
Could this be used as a mentorship for younger people? Like if their parents can't help them fly, you would be able to do that for them, or do the parents have to be present?
Understand you're right. Anybody could join MAC. MAC, we're very safety orientated. So if somebody's going to teach somebody to fly, say for children, they'll have to have the permission of the parents and all that stuff written down, everything. We gladly teach anybody to fly in our hobby. We welcome them warmly. We have a very reduced membership fee for juniors, and when I was the director, it was free for any junior member. And I'll try to do that for them as well. So, that it?
Councillor, staff left have popped up. Mr. Harding?
I'll speak after the delegation.
Very good. Councillor Martin, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that council approve a one-year pilot project that allows members of the Nanaimo Model Airs Club or individuals who qualify for a permit from the Director of Parks and Rec to fly unmanned aerial vehicles in designated locations at designated times.
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. I'm going to trust we have no further questions for the delegation. Mr. Rollins, thanks very much for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Now I'm on. Okay. I have a question for staff. The report presented to us talks about monitoring. Some of these individuals who may not be members of the club would then still have to get a permit through Parks and Rec? And how do we monitor the area where this is going to take place for people to just show up and don't have either one of these?
Am I on? Thank you, Worship, through Councillor Bonner. Like any emerging sport or recreation activity, we will have different ways of having to monitor. A lot of it is by word of mouth, a lot of it's by reporting, a lot of it's by just reporting back to us on what's working and what's not working. We have reached out, the two locations, we've reached out both to the baseball, which is mainly using the site for Roxman, and actually already linked them with them, so those groups will be the most possible user conflicts. So in answering that, that's how we'll do the reporting. For those who aren't a member of the club, but do want to go with it, it would be similar. They'll come and get a permit if they show that they have the other authority based on Transport Canada, which those regulations come into effect in June, and we'll monitor with that. One of this, as both delegations mentioned, we do have this going on throughout the community, and not always in a park, but we've particularly picked two fields. Initially, there was 3 fields, and if this is successful, we have some other fields which we'd come back to council to add in different parts of the community. But this gives 2 locations, and I believe on the attached to your report, even though we had one additional part of the report wasn't there, but I think it's on your updated one, which shows other sites in the Lower Mainland, or the cities in the Lower Mainland that have this. It gives us some examples of how to monitor and how to report back.
I have a question, if I may. The report refers to times where flight will be allowed, but it actually doesn't say what the times are. Do you have an idea what those times would be?
Working with the club, we have a number of times on each site that's a little different, and it'll change as the season changes. Particularly, for example, baseball season, we'll have some days during the week that'll work really well, the weekdays, but weekends when tournaments are on, it doesn't work as well. So a lot of it's going to be based on bookings of those fields. Elaine Hamilton doesn't get as much bookings as Roxman does, so we'll have some more flexibility there, but it really based on some of those other user group bookings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If no one else, no further discussion, all those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is the Bruce Avenue and 5th Street Road cost share. Mr. Lindsay or Mr. Sims? Mr. Sims, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. In front of you for your consideration this evening, we have the potential to share in the costs of reprofiling Bruce Avenue and conducting some surface works in cooperation with the developer. The developer is required to build out the full road frontage to centerline. Bruce Avenue requires a reprofiling, and you can't reprofile or regrade half a road, so we would participate with that. So if council approves it, then we would amend the financial plan to include $152,000 for the project.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown. Seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Saving money. We like it. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is the establishment of Morningside Drive sewer and sanitary service area and parcel tax. Mr. Sims?
Thank you, Your Worship. The report for you this evening is rather thick, but it's regarding setting bylaws to establish a local area service and also to establish a parcel tax. So this follows up on Council's motion in July of 2018 to petition the owners, or to see if there was petition to install a sanitary sewer. Currently, these waterfront properties are serviced only by septic. So this is a benefit not only to the residents, but also to the broader community.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would move that local area service, Morningside Drive, establishing bylaw 2019 number 7281, to establish the Morningside Drive local area sewer and sanitary line service, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would move that local area service Morningside Drive, establishing bylaw 2019, number 7281, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Councillor Brown.
I would move that local area service Morningside Drive, establishing bylaw 2019, number 7281, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Councillor Brown.
I would move that Morningside Drive, local service area parcel tax bylaw 2019, number 7288, to provide the authority to impose a parcel tax on the Morningside Drive local service area, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
I would move that Morningside Drive local service area parcel tax bylaw 2019, number 7288, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
And
Councillor
finally, Your Worship, I would move that Morningside Drive local service area parcel tax bylaw 2019, number 7288, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is development permit application number DP 1070-591 Bradley Street. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, this is a development permit application for the subject property. It's for a 59-unit development. There are a number of variances which are outlined in the report with the rationale and staff's explanation for our support included in the report. Certainly happy to speak to those if council has additional questions. I would note that the first variance mentions a 30 meters to 0 meters setback variance from our watercourse setback. And as outlined in the report, there's the difference between the provincial regulations and requirements, which the application does meet, and the city's requirements, which is measured from the top of bank, and in fact would put that setback actually through the property out into the street, and in some cases on the other side of the road. So it is necessary to look at variances in order to allow for the development of the parcel. And I know that the applicant is here this evening, and I'm sure they're prepared to go into more detail into the proposed design, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. We have a number of delegations. The first is Paul Chapman. Mr. Chapman, I think you know the drill. You can introduce yourself in 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Paul Chapman. I live on Franklin Street, and I'm here today with the 911 Area Land Trust. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'm going to talk about riparian area setbacks and their importance in the support of many values. I will address this to riparian values in general, but won't comment on any development proposals specifically. The city is to be applauded for the adoption of riparian area setbacks. That is to say, maintaining the natural features of wetland surrounds or riverbanks, such as trees and shrubs, etc. Intact riparian areas slow down rain stormwater, allow for the percolation of water into subsurface interflow, and the reabsorption of water into aquifers. What does this mean? Riparian areas deal with stormwater to prevent flooding, erosion, loss of habitat, and damage to property. Removal of riparian vegetation means that we need to build expensive storm drains, expensive to build and expensive to maintain, that rush stormwater off the surface into creeks and oceans, causing erosion, habitat loss, scarcity of groundwater, and downstream volume issues. Our storm drains move us away from water balance towards imbalance. We should be looking to have a net decrease in the amount of storm drains and a net increase in natural systems such as rain gardens, swales, wetlands, riparian and riverine systems bolstered to deal with increasingly intense storm events and lengthening periods of dry and drought driven by climate change. Our goal is to return to water balance. There is a saying, my upstream solution is your downstream problem. The negative effects of denuding riparian areas are realized downstream. In terms of urban forest retention, riparian forests are the highest value. Their function as habitat and protecting water balance cannot be adequately recreated by planting offset trees elsewhere. The quality of the water, the habitat and habitation where we live, depend on the quality of the riparian forest. It is perhaps easiest to recognize the value of riparian areas and related rivers in creeks and salmon-bearing streams. We are lucky to have a few of those within city boundaries, but not nearly as many as there once were. Riparian setbacks exist for a reason. They should not be routinely be subjected to variances. Their values as habitat and city infrastructure are too dear to lose and too difficult to replace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Chapman, Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the riparian areas regulations, we are considering a variance to the zoning bylaw. But in I think it was 2013 or 2014, the BC Ombudsperson sort of analyzed the professional reliance model, and they made 25 recommendations, 24 which Flynn Rowe is implementing. From NALT's perspective, in terms of the riparian areas regulation, do they agree that the self-reliance model with the BC Ombudsperson's general recommendations is a good one?
You have to be much more in tune with what that says. But I would say,
I think we prefer regulation, and that regulation has an enforcement branch. Self-regulation is subject to the appearance sometimes that it isn't as vigorous as it could otherwise be. And in terms of provincial regulation versus the city's regulation, I think that the stronger regulations of the city are really a point of pride for our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thanks very much, Mr. Chapman. The next is Jean Playden, owners of Strata Plan VIS 3635.
May I ask that my husband, Bruce Connor, hold up my prop, which is a copy of the...
Absolutely. Just ask you to introduce yourself and they also serve who only stand and wait, Milton said. 5 minutes, the light will go orange at 4. Please.
My name is Jean Playden. I'm located at Unit 18 of 571 Bradley Street, and I represent the owners of Strata Plan VIS 3635 Parkridge Place Strata Corporation. We strongly oppose the development permit 1070 at 591 Bradley Street as proposed. We believe the following issues have not been adequately addressed. Firstly, legal issues. The existing restrictive covenant was registered in the Land Title Office in 1994. The covenant area boundary follows the top edge of the very steep and unstable slope that runs directly into Millstone River without any natural breaks or benches that might intercept a landslip or erosion. The 3.5-meter building restriction area boundary back from the top edge of the slope is to ensure there are no impacts to the slope or the river. The restrictive covenant, item D, states the grantee, the City of Nanaimo, considers that, and the grantor, the owners of 571 and 591 Bradley, acknowledge that the lands are subject to landslip and erosion. The grantor agrees in particular to not construct or place any residential building within the covenant area and building restriction area. Further, the restrictions and covenants herein contained shall be covenants running with the lands and shall be perpetual. This is the drawing from the architect that shows the actual covenant here. And clearly you can see that the development is right on top of the restrictive covenant, and this area right here should totally not be permitted under the current restrictive covenant. This development purports to violate the restrictive covenant that runs with the land. The building footprint must be reduced in size to maintain the existing covenant boundaries as required on title. Secondly, environmental issues. We strongly disagree with the proposed watercourse setback reduction from 30 meters measured from the top of bank of Millstone River to 0 meters from the steep slope, dropping down to our salmon-bearing Millstone River. According to an email received from our MLA, Sheila Malcolmson, on April 30th, it states, notwithstanding the 15-meter SPIA, the qualified environmental professional that completed the RER assessment also recommended that a significant area beyond the SPIA be protected for both wildlife habitat and slope stability protection. The elimination of the SPIA setback on this steep slope bordering Millstone River is not in the public interest. We request that the 15-meter SPIA be maintained as recommended. The City of Nanaimo is a signatory to the UBCM Resolution 172, Salmon Habitat Protection. If there is a landslip during the course of construction of this development, how can the city claim to have protected our wild Pacific salmon? Is the city being good stewards of our resources by permitting this development along the steep slope bordering our salmon-bearing Millstone River? We think not. Lastly, public safety issues.
1 minute, Ms. Bladen, please.
The additional vehicles associated with this 59-unit development will exacerbate the busy traffic corridor that Bradley Street sits on. When entering the roadway, visibility is limited due to the number of cars parked along the street. There's significant potential for personal injury and accident due to increased traffic volume and speed. The safety of Brecken School students, daycare children traveling this street is paramount. The proposed new crosswalk is insufficient to protect our children. Will the city agree to construct the long-awaited Wall Street connector? In conclusion, the owners of Strataplan VIS 3635, Parkridge Place Strata Corporation, ask the city to reject development permit 1070 at 591 Bradley Street as proposed, based on the stated legal, environmental, and safety issues. Thank you for your consideration of this information.
That was absolutely perfect within 5 minutes. I'm impressed. We don't allow applause or critical comments either from the gallery, please. Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Question for the delegation?
Yes, question for the delegation. You mentioned the setback, the 30-meter setback. I'm curious that you're opposed to it. Like, are you not living within a 30-meter setback? Like, your property itself is closer to the water than this other place will be.
The restrictive covenant that covers both our property and their property. I am not sure what the SPIA requirement was on our lot. I actually have a diagram of it. But I can't answer that, I'm sorry, because the SPIA wasn't shown on our lot. It's only shown on the diagram of the lot in question.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much, Ms. Bladen. Appreciate it. You and your spouse. The next delegation is Raymond DeBeeld Architects, Inc. Mr. DeBeeld, you know the drill, please.
I've only been up here once or twice. Is there a pointer on one of these? Can it point or no? No, okay. Ooh, Raymond DeBeeld Architect, sorry. 43 slides, or 34 slides in 9 seconds each or less. I'll just talk about, we involved for a development permit, we started back in 2016 and went through a series of public engagement, which is a little bit unusual for a development permit in this town. So hopefully you can read the notes from our presentation on your screens. I won't get into a lot of details since we don't have too much time. We've had several meetings with the Strata, and we had a discretionary public information meeting We've had numerous and numerous meetings with all our engineers and consultants, with city staff who've been very diligent, and obviously everybody's concerned about the protection of the salmon and the park and everything. We've changed the design of the building as much as we could in terms of the number of units, the number of parking stalls. We had a variance originally of 37, even though our parking consultant said that was fine. We're down to 0. We're now down to about 1.42 stalls per unit. From our perspective, obviously we're very concerned about the environment as well. A lot of the work that we do is sustainable, and we're trying to do as best as we can. Obviously there's development and obviously human occupation, but again, try to meet and listen to the concerns of our neighbors and potential clients. It's the biggest contention, I think, from the Stratus point of view, which they didn't really mention too much, and we'll see it on another slide quickly, is just where the location is. Oh, sorry, public engagement. As you can see, between our development next door and, yeah, the riparian area would be quite significant on their part of the site as well. As you can see, it's hard to see, but all those little white lines in the green are the contour intervals at 0.5 meters. As you can see, they're quite a bit more spaced, and the areas we'll see in a slide, this is just from the outside looking at the intersection. We're proposing to replace that guardrail and some sidewalk along the edge there, so create a proper street edge, as you can see along there. Again, bring around to the left of the slide. There would be a raised sidewalk to kind of rebuild the millstone entry into the park there and provide additional 15 extra parking stalls, public parking stalls, to alleviate any concerns. So again, it's city property, but again, with the developer paying for a lot of that. So this is the area proposed primarily where much of the building is. You can see it's fairly flat. It's not actually super steep, much like the contours from the edge of the existing strata to the left. Again, you can see a lot of invasives, a lot of back berries. Again, this was all cleared a long time ago. This is the area. It's hard to see in the photo a little bit, but it's actually quite flat in the middle of the site. So there is a ledge, not that we're expecting excavators and equipment to be falling down. And there are we don't usually get too involved with geotechnical engineers at the development permit stage, but we've had a lot of discussion about how to make the bank stable and how to deal with stormwater detention and everything. This is the area I think that the Strata is obviously most concerned. It's a shared easement between our two properties, or their property, or we're using as well. Again, it's relatively narrow. It's only 6 meters, and we've come up, or at least we've had some discussions with them in terms of some possible solutions to kind of mitigate the risk in terms of safety and traffic and that kind of thing. This project's a little bit different, so I won't go through. Hopefully you can read that, or you read that. It's just talked about some of the environmental issues, some of the traffic issues that we've dealt with, and how slow it. This was original, the development that was approved back in 1995. Yes, it's a long time. Those rules no longer apply, but again, that's basically where the townhouses were kind of based on a similar concept to that. Again, just in plan, you can see it's quite a bit different. Oh, I guess I should be talking to the mic. It's hard to see in this diagram. It's a little bit hard to complicate it, but you can see the dashed fuchsia line at the very top is the 15-meter riparian setback, the SPIA. That's a provincial regulation. Half of that typically is for litter and everything. Oh, I have to go faster. Sorry.
You've got about 27 seconds.
Yes, okay. I won't talk about any of these. As you can see, the streetscape, you've probably seen those. I'll just end with the highlight. At the very end, you'll see I guess just look at that close. So you can see the dark line is the section of the existing grade. And we think we've had a beautiful building, a nice streetscape. I think there's some viability, and I think there's a to density. So that's it. Sorry. It's hard to take 3 years into 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Beald. Questions for Mr. Beald? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. When we were out to see you and the developer, the owner, I guess, regarding the development of the property, you mentioned something about a retaining wall under the street, or something you were going to do there, and also a retaining wall down at the bottom of the thing. Could you refresh that for me?
Sure. There's an existing city retaining wall that's holding up the street. I guess it was in a rush when they built it at the time. Doesn't meet seismic requirements now, so I guess at some point in time, it would have to be upgraded. Because we're building a parking structure 2 stories below the street level, essentially, that makes that retaining wall redundant because we backfilled. It also allows us to put street trees along the boulevard in that part. One of the engineering discussions that we've had in terms of bank stability, construction stability, and a way to not tear down or remove any of the trees far down the site, because sometimes when you have a really steep slope when you develop it, it's hard in terms of how deep your foundations go. And so we've buried a retaining wall along there with lock blocks. Again, that stabilizes it so that we don't have to dig down so deep. Again, it's just, a lot of those details are worked out in the construction drawings phases, but again, it's just a development permit at this point. But there are ways and means of building on steep slopes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Yeah, so erosion, thank you, Worship, to the delegation. Yeah, erosion is a big issue with silt, and it disrupts salmon-bearing streams quite dramatically. And so the riparian zone is quite important. And my understanding, there was a covenant placed on that property to protect development from that area from development that would cause erosion. And it looks like the corner of the development is on the other side of the covenant. It's not a huge area, and I was just curious why it was necessary, like there was no possibility to make it a design to just keep the development inside the covenant area. It didn't seem like it was too much of a footprint.
Sure, I guess the covenants, again, you'd have to go through, actually read all the details of them. A lot of them are pretty obsolete in terms of the details of them. The rules and regulations and the city requirements are quite a bit different now. Again, I think we've been able to deal with it in terms of making that bank stable and dealing with that. And as the covenant area is actually substantially bigger than what it was before, essentially we're not really doing too much on the existing steep bank slope because we're removing the trails and everything else on there. There's just not much. It's just left intact. Yeah, there are construction ways and means of dealing with construction, but again, it's relatively flat where the building is being built, so that's a lot easier to maintain and control as opposed to a steep site where you're building into the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a house that's on a very steep slope that's way steeper than that, and there's ways that we do that.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the delegation. I have 2 questions. You said that there, on your slide there, that there will be additional public parking. Where's that going to be?
It's at the end of Millstone. I don't know. Oh, sorry. I'm pressing the wrong way. I want to go backwards all the time.
Like, is that the 4 visitor spots you're talking about, or?
No. That's just public
I'm sorry, I
parking,
missed
yes.
it.
Sorry, I'll just, right there. Just to the right. It's an existing, it looks like a parking lot for the apartment next door, but it's actually not. It's a city right away. So again, we'd be reorganizing, rebuilding that, and rebuilding a new sidewalk along the edge, so it's space safer for.
So how many parking spots?
15 stalls.
15 stalls?
Yeah.
Okay. And then my second question, with the height variance, is there going to be a shadowing problem for the neighboring residents?
I don't believe so. I mean, again, we can go through that in a bit more detail in terms of construction drawings. The building is fairly far back, and it is stepped and staggered. So.
Thank you.
It's mainly southern exposure, so.
Thank you. Any further questions to the delegation? Thank you very much, Mr. Field.
You're welcome.
We do have correspondence from Sandra Thompson, the volunteer chair of the Bradley Street Neighborhood Association. I'd like a motion to receive that. So moved, Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. There is a staff recommendation for a motion. Is anyone going to make the motion? And seconded Councillor Hemmons. Discussion. Councillor Hemmons, please.
Thank you. Questions for staff, just getting my head around that. This section was actually quoted by Mr. Chapman as, or I'm sorry, a couple of the residents regarding Sheila Malcolmson's letter, and I just would like some clarification. So notwithstanding the 15-meter SPIA, the qualified environmental professional that completed the RAR assessment recommended that a significant area beyond the SPIA be protected for both wildlife habitat and slope stability. As a result, the proposed environmental setback area as measured by the high water mark of the Millstone River for this development varies approximately from 52 to 22. So what this is saying is that the developer has taken in that 15-meter SPIA requirement and actually grown it based on that qualified professional saying you actually want it to be bigger than the 15 meters. And so they've done that? Am I reading that correctly?
Your Worship, maybe if I can ask if, I believe it's attachment C, can be brought up. It might help with the discussion a little bit. Right there, sorry if you back up, right there. So I know I apologize, it's very hard to read on the screen. Maybe, hopefully it's a little easier in your agenda package, but the dash line at the bottom does represent the 15-meter setback from the natural boundary of the millstone. The blue line represents the original anticipated boundary for development, or the maximum boundary under the 1994 covenant, I believe. So in addition to that 15-meter setback, the area of the property back to the dashed red line is the new proposed development boundary. So at the closest point, the development site would be approximately 22 meters from the millstone. But at the furthest point, as you move west, you can see that increases significantly and jumps up to, I believe it's in the neighborhood of 55 meters. So it's those additional areas outside the 15 meters that are going to be protected on the subject property.
Thank you. And one more, if I may. My read of this is that the city guidelines around watercourse development are actually more stringent than the provinces. So this variance is varying our bylaw, but it still falls within the provincial regulations. And further, if I'm hearing you correctly, that if we were to follow our own regulations on this, we would never be able to develop this property because it would have to be set back into Bradley Street. Is that correct?
I don't know if I would say in all cases are we more stringent than the provinces. Certainly in this case, we're significantly more, in that our zoning boundary, which was established in the mid-90s, talks about a setback from the top of the bank. And just given the nature of the millstone and the very wide valley that it sits in, that top of bank and that associated setback, you're correct, brings you out. And it is on this plan, but I apologize, it's very difficult. I can barely make it out here. There's a dash line that runs down Bradley Street and actually appears to bump out and go and touch the other side of the road. So that is the city setback under the zoning bylaw, which is that 30 meters from the top of bank. So yes, the entire property would be within our zoning bylaw setback, and such is the reason for the significant variance.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, I'll say that I'm inclined to support staff's recommendation on this. I have met with the residents, and I understand the reservations. I held reservations. I still hold reservations about that entryway into the parkade, as well as the traffic along Bradley Street, especially with the elementary school so close. But I look forward to hearing from my fellow councillors their rationale. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly through you to Mr. Lindsay. Reading the staff report, it's clear that the covenant area boundary or the development will, much more area is permitted for the development and the way they've situated the building. I'm just curious about there is the encroachment over the actual boundary, though. Is that an issue in the covenant, or?
If I understand the question right, the existing covenant from 1994, which is represented by the red dash line on the attachment, would need to be amended. Oh, sorry, it's represented by the blue dash line. Right. Sorry, I'm messing things up now. It's represented by the blue dash line is the 1994 boundary. That covenant will have to be amended, and it will now be reflected with the red line, which is represented here.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff. I'm just wondering if there's a traffic study on this, because I'm very concerned about the additional traffic on Bradley Street, which to me is already an overutilized road, and I believe has a large number of accidents. Thank you.
Your Worship, generally on form and character development permits where the zoning's already been established, we wouldn't be seeking traffic studies. It does not mean that the accesses are not reviewed for safety, and improvements are considered by our traffic engineers, as has been done on this case. But no, we do not typically get full traffic studies for form and character development permits.
Sorry, Councillor Turley, you'll have to hit your, I turned you off. Thank you.
So, Your Worship, through you to staff, on this diagram here on the bottom left-hand corner, where it shows the entrance going in, there's quite a kind of a lump of land, it appears, that's between Bradley Street and where the actual driveway is. Is that something that can be removed to widen the driveway?
Your Worship, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I believe the area you're referring to, there is already quite a steep retaining wall in that area. So that existing driveway that you see on the bottom left hand, as you've described it, is the existing driveway that's as part of that existing strata, which goes down and services those units. And I think you heard the delegation, it's approximately 6 meters between the garage door and that existing retaining structure there.
I just, my further follow-up, I just wondered if there's any way of regrading that to give a wider entrance. But I don't recall what the slope is there with, because I was there last fall.
Your Worship, I guess anything's technically possible, but it is a very significant retaining wall that's already on the site.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. When the original proposal came to our attention, I was not especially in favor of it, but I have to say that the changes that have been made make this project much more palatable to me. The change in the parking, the change downward in density. Certainly, I think this council is always concerned about riparian protection, but I think the explanation we've been given satisfies me. And to build on Councillor Hemmond's question earlier, as I understand the report, the new watercourse setback will be protected by a new covenant to be registered on the property, and there will be habitat signage and so on. So overall, I'm understanding of the concern of the residents, but I think this project is now at a scale and a design that I am able to support it. Thank you.
I have visited this site twice in the company of several councillors both times, once with the architect and once with people who live at Bradley Street. There have been changes that have been referred to by Councillor Thorpe. There was significant concern expressed, as I recall, about all of the traffic from this building flowing in and out of what is a, relatively speaking, fairly narrow right-of-way access existing on the existing strata development. But I'm also conscious of the fact that with the changes to the project, you are now going to have only literally half the amount of traffic flowing through there because of the redesigning of the underground parking. I have looked at the many pictures and drawings and considered this. I have considered the needs of the neighborhood and the concerns around traffic, but I also have to be conscious of the fact that this community has a significant need for housing. And that is expressed to us over and over again by various groups, from the poorest to the richest, both in terms of the availability and the expense of such accommodation. If this were the original proposal, I probably would not consider voting in favor of it. But having seen the changes, considering that they are relatively significant, looking at the setback, having looked at the property and considered what already exists in terms of development along the Millstone, I am going to, unless someone can persuade me, and I'm always open to persuasion because I've attempted to do that on occasion myself, unless one of my fellow councillors can persuade me to the contrary, I'm inclined to support this proposal. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that riparian area is extremely undervalued for the services that it does provide in terms of water balancing, and I think that we've encroached on it so incredibly much in the development of our city. Our baseline of what's acceptable is very skewed. It should be back at Bradley Street, and we have allowed development to encroach quite dramatically. However, there was a covenant placed on this property with the expectation that the development would happen within that line, and the building does cross it, and that covenant was put in place for reasons of erosion and protecting the bank. And I'm not okay with it going across. I don't think it sends a message that we take our banks and our riparian area seriously. So I'm not going to be supportive of this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'm learning lots about riparian from my fellow councillors. Thank you. I will not be supporting either. I struggle mostly with the traffic implications. I think there's far too many people for that road. I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the height of the building and shadowing on people, because I think they are going to lose their sunlight, so I will not be supporting.
I have staff left. Mr. Sims.
Maybe. I'll be staff left. Your Worship, just a couple of points just brought up with the traffic. There was 15 or so years ago a project, a DCC project, to realign Wall Street to connect with Hawley, and that was removed from the DCC bylaw by the council of the day. So that's one piece of information. The other one is I do believe it is a city-owned retaining wall, as the delegation mentioned, and at this point, to my knowledge, there's no plan to do anything with that wall, but that's, you know, having brought that forward it's a concern for us for sure.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Motion carries. The next is development permit application number DVP 11119-4800 Uplands Drive, 6035 Lindley Valley Drive. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, a development permit for the subject property. In this case is for a 251 unit rental housing development with 3 buildings, each of which have 4 stories. There are 3 variances associated with this application. One is a height variance. The second, which is a retaining wall variance, I would notice on paper it appears to be a significant variance of 1.2 to approximately 7.5 meters. In fact, this is a series of retaining walls that will be built along Uplands Drive to basically mimic the existing grade. There's quite a steep grade from Uplands up to the buildable portion of the lot, an existing slope along that portion of the property, so the retaining walls will be basically built along and reflecting the existing grade that you see there as you drive along Uplands Drive today. The third variance, which is a bit unusual, speaks to removing screening around refuse receptacles, which is a long-standing requirement we've had in our zoning bylaw. In this case, the applicants are proposing to use a relatively innovative proposal where the receptacles are actually below grade. So there's very little in terms of any presence above ground. So we've seen this used in other places, but to my knowledge, it's the first time we've seen that in Nanaimo. So given the proposal, there's no requirement for screening, so we're asking for a variance to that requirement of the bylaw.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. Councillor Brown. Seconded by Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is development permit application number DP 1123-479 Wills Road. Mr. Lindsay, again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, development permit for the subject property, in this case for 160 units of seniors congregate care. I would note that this is generally described as phase 2 of what you can see on the attachment in front of you this evening, which is the memory care, which was built on Rutherford Road just a couple of years ago. So this project will allow for additional opportunities for seniors housing in the neighborhood. There are variances associated with this application, including what appear to be significant height variances. I would note this is a combination of a very challenging site in terms of topography. There's a significant knoll that exists in the middle of the site, and also the efforts by the applicant to cluster this building and actually have very minimal, it's like only about 27% lot coverage, which is well below what we would see in sort of typical developments of this zoning category. So much lower lot coverage, but in exchange are seeking height variances in order to reduce the footprint and the impact on some of the more sensitive areas of this property.
Thank you very much. We have a delegation. Mr. Kyle Schick, the project manager. Mr. Schick, I think you've heard all of the time limits expressed, so please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Krog, councillors. Would like to introduce to you Edgewater Seniors Living, brought to you by the Avenir Group. My name is Kyle Schick. I'm the project manager who's headed up the design with our firm, Finlayson Burnett Architecture in Victoria. And we're pleased to present to you 160 units of seniors congregate care and market units. What you see before you is our revised design based on the design panel comments that we received in late October of 2018. And we've been working with staff to develop the proposal that we see for it. You see in front of you. Lost them.
Yes,
we're losing microphones here.
We'll give you
It's okay. Maybe that's the hint.
No. I'll give you an extra 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
So, as hopefully you're familiar with, the Wills Road property is essentially phase 2 of the memory care that was built fronting on Rutherford and Wills Road, and this building will now allow an amazing continuum of care that will allow people to age in place. This is kind of the typology of building that fills in those niches that we see as the population ages with different forms of independent living, assisted living, and people can actually purchase units and access the services there. Just a quick little take on our site plan, showing phase 1 and our sort of compact footprint with the waterfront trail in front of us in between Long Lake and then Lakeview Road to the north. This is just showing our lower level. This is demonstrating we've made attempts to get as much parking as we can underneath. I think of our 101 proposed stalls, we have, if I'm not mistaken, 96 below. So, we've made considerable efforts to try and minimize the impact of that. We're coming up the building to our main level. We, as the director mentioned, we do have some significant elevation challenges on this site, and we also have some flood control levels to deal with from Long Lake. So that has actually pushed our lowest floor elevation about 1 meter to 1.5 meters higher than we were originally anticipating, thus adding up on the height variance ask. This is just a schematic of our landscape plan, and I just wanted to show it to you because really the impetus for this design was a result of our discussions with staff and the attempts to enhance and maintain the tree area on the right-hand side of the property there. That's an existing not old growth, but sorry, second growth stand that has a well-established habitat, and staff felt that other submissions or other forms that we had previously provided were encroaching too far into that. So that was sort of what pushed us more to the left-hand side of the site. You'll see here is a 3D model of just our building in relationship to the phase 1. You will note that actually, even though it is a 7-story building, it is 6 stories at the road, just the way the grading works, the way our topography falls off towards Long Lake. There's another street view for you. This is just a computer image taken with the help of Google Street View to just show kind of the how our building fits in, and that some of the trees that are around the existing site are going to tower over this building still as we build it. There's a view from across the lake, just demonstrating again that the tree canopy up and in behind the building will stay above it, and this building doesn't protrude above that to impact the views in and around the lake. This is another one closer up from the highway, demonstrating the same. Another shot with coming above from down Rutherford up near the hotel, just again trying to demonstrate that we've tried to do our best, even though we're asking for a significant height variance, to impact the adjacent properties as best we can. Now this I will ask you to take with a bit of grain of salt. We spent some time with Google Earth. If you want to see this world in 3D, I recommend it. But you can actually geolocate our 3D models, and we're happy to share this information with staff just to demonstrate it. And the computer does the work for you. But what I wanted to demonstrate is that
20 seconds.
Thank you.
20 seconds.
Just I wanted to demonstrate that the trees from the satellite mapping are still going to be above the building in behind. And again, just some other shots there. So thank you again for the opportunity to present this development to you, and I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, allowing for mic time. You even had some time left. Councillor Armstrong.
No, it's okay. I think there's trees already on site, so obviously the shadowing won't be the big issue that I thought it was going to be. Thank you.
Any further questions for the delegation? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through to delegation, in one of your slides at the early part there, there's a walkway that shows going in front of the buildings and then stopping just prior to the trail. It's way back. What? I have to look at it. I guess it's that one. That one would work there. That seems to be a walkway that doesn't quite touch the other existing walkway there. Would the developer be willing to join it to the other walkway and allow people to go through there?
As far as I understand, the covenant requires the developer to extend Lakeview Road along to the I can't remember the name of the street that it would connect to. I believe Lakeview, if not. And as far as I understand, the trail that you see there was put in phase 1, and it was dedicated to the city. So it is, I think, as far as I understand, Parks has made that connection through to Lakeview Road with that trail. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Maybe we can clarify this with Mr. Lindsay right now before I get to the next question for the delegation. We've got the path.
Your Worship, I wish I could. My recollection is it is now connected. That boundary you see there is actually city park boundary. So as mentioned, the trail was built when phase 1 was constructed a number of years ago, and it's in place now. And I believe it will take you from Wills Road through and connect ultimately to the Long Lake Strata Heights in there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to answer that question, because my physical fitness is not bicycling, but I do walk. I've walked actually from your exit from Rutherford Road down there. There's that trail that is shown there, I believe, goes over a bridge, then up a small incline and joins up with the other trail that takes you over to Soil Drive. So,
thank you.
There's nothing like local knowledge. Thank you, Councillor Turley. Any further questions for the delegation? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff?
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Armstrong?
I'm very much in favor of this project. I've toured the memory care complex. I've seen their plans for the future. I think it's a great way to age in place, also for people to be close to their loved ones so they don't have to drive long distances to see them. So I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's a great concept, and I hope we see more of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. Thank you very much. The next is development variance permit number, application number DVP 381-1875 Boxwood Road. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. This is, as you mentioned, a development variance permit. Of note, there was a previous development permit that was approved on the subject property. Since that time, the applicants have elected to consolidate the properties, and that lot consolidation has resulted in the need for the setback variance. Also, the applicants are seeking a variance to the height of a retaining wall, which would allow the site to be developed at one continuous grade.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP 381? Seeing no one, the motion?
I'll move staff recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bonner. Any discussion with respect to the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is rezoning application number RA400-1300 Junction Avenue. Again, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. We have for Council's consideration this evening bylaw for first and second reading, which would allow for the rezoning of the subject property from R1 to Core 2 to allow for multifamily development. And as outlined in the report, the applicant's stated intention is to build a purpose-built rental
on this property. From staff's perspective, certainly an exciting opportunity to bring rental housing into the Chase River neighborhood town center. And it is, I would note that the applicant is working with the guidelines which recommend Finnish agrarian design. And I say that just because I don't get to say that enough at council meetings. So. But we'll of course be bringing that design forward to council through development permit process should the rezoning be successful.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-147, to rezone 1300 Junction Avenue from single dwelling residential, R1, to mixed-use corridor, Core 2, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Councillor Brown.
I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-147, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Am I on? Yeah. Okay. I have a question regarding the rentals. We're told in the report that the developer says they're going to be putting rentals in, and we're rezoning this application. My question would be, can we put a covenant on the property that it has to be rental?
Your Worship, at this point, the amendment to the bylaw, our zoning bylaw allows for options. It allows for the developer to select whether they would wish to pursue market or rental developments. We have not had discussions with the applicant if they'd be interested in registering such a covenant, and I'd be nervous of giving you their feelings on that matter unless I had the opportunity to speak with them first.
So to follow up, if we do rezone this, they don't necessarily have to build rental properties on that. They can just build whatever they want to that zone?
Through Your Worship, Councillor Bonner, that's correct. They could in the end elect to develop the property, stratify it, and market those units.
May I put a motion forward? Okay.
We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion respecting the motion? Councillor Bonner?
I'm just not sure where to proceed here because if we vote on this, it'll be second reading and we'll be done, and I won't have an option to ask for a covenant as part of the community contribution or that.
Ms. Gurry? Mr. Lindsay? Mr. Lindsay?
Yeah, Your Worship, I just had an opportunity for a quick consult with the applicant's agent who's here this evening, and he's indicated that the developer would be willing to register a covenant that required rental housing if that was what the majority of council desired. So, Your Worship, it would be an additional motion to secure, or modified motion to secure a restrictive use covenant for rental only as part of the recommendation.
I'd like to move that.
Can someone recommend some wording that will actually pass muster, please, Ms. Gurry?
Yeah, Your Worship. So first, you have second reading on the table right now, that after council votes on that, it could be in addition to motion number 3, which is that council direct staff to secure restrictive use covenant, community contribution, road dedication, and statutory right-of-way to accommodate the future Wexford Creek restoration project. So it could be in addition to motion number 3 after number 2 is done.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. This is why we rely on you. Any further discussion on second reading? All those in favor? Motion carries. Councillor Brown, are you going to, I think we move the existing motion, or do you move a completely new motion? What's the easiest for?
It would depend on council's feeling of Councillor Bonner's addition. So what could be done is Councillor Brown could read out motion number 3, and you could friendly amend it, or it would depend on what council chooses. If there's kind of a consent at the table to make that change that has been mentioned, then you could just go ahead and add it to start with.
I'm going to suggest that perhaps the motion read that motion that council direct staff to secure the community contribution, road dedication, a restrictive covenant requiring that the development be for rental purposes only, and a statutory right-of-way to accommodate the future Wexford Creek Restoration Project. Does that seem satisfactory?
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Bonner.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Kesselbrock? Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I will not be supporting this. While I do acknowledge the need for rental in our city, we do have record numbers of what I would call market. The market has been driving the development of rental units. As this is just the rezoning stage, I think there's a lot that could the market could dramatically shift by the time this finally gets to the building permit stage. And at that time, if this is a limiting factor on the development of that parcel in terms of the market-driven forces, then I think that would also be a shame. And then we might have to be considering a covenant amendment. This motion, as was originally drafted by staff, even though the developer is open to amending it, this provides ultimate flexibility. So I'm willing to preserve that flexibility. So I would not be supporting that, and I would support the original motion as drafted.
Might I suggest then, if that's the view, that you make a motion now to amend? Well, we're at third.
No.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would actually agree with Councillor Martman because they're fundamentally different motions. One is with a restrictive use covenant. One is without. So I would suggest you vote on the current motion. If that doesn't pass, then Councillor Brown could make a subsequent motion.
Well, no, we have Councillor Turley, Councillors Armstrong and Thorpe, and I'm going to speak to it as well. Councillor Turley, please.
Yes, Your Worship. So Ms. Gurry can probably correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm probably closer to needing the previous facility than the rest of you. But the question I have is my understanding or recollection is that the BC Tenancy Act was changed recently to allow for condo strata developments, or at least not allow for it, but to restrict the ability that they have to disallow rentals. In other words, if a person owns a condo in a strata, they can rent it out even though the strata may try to disallow them to do so. Now, I don't know if that's correct or not, but I'm sure I heard that somewhere. So,
if I may respond and interrupt your comments,
sure.
I think that has been a suggestion, but I don't believe legislation has been introduced, but it's a valid point.
Okay.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will not be supporting either. I've heard from lots of people out in Cinnabar that would like to have the opportunity to downsize and actually purchase there. I think we have a lot of condos for rental right now. We don't have many for purchase. So I also agree with what Councillor Brown said, and the fact that the market could change tomorrow, and we may be left with a building that will not be built. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. I agree with the comments of Councillor Brown, and I really appreciate the fact that the developer is willing to undertake a covenant, but I don't care to make rules on the fly, and I think we have a good policy, and I don't feel inclined to support the new wording of this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And the reason I was coming forward with this is we're significantly changing the value of the land here by this rezoning. And there comes a point where we need to go back to our citizens and say, we're trying to create affordable housing. And sometimes that affordable housing is rental housing, and in order to make rental housing affordable, you have to have more of it available than there's a need. And that helps work the price down so that people can afford it. If the event, like, reason I want this covenant on there is if the market changes. So that if condos all start going through the roof again and everybody wants a condo, that we still will have the opportunity to have rental properties built in this town. And I applaud all the developers out there who are working and developing new rental units, and I thank the developer on this one for offering the solution, and I trust that this will happen. It's just that we are rezoning this property, we are giving value to something, and all I'm asking for in return is to do what they said they would do and have it on paper. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. Notwithstanding, I provided the wording for the amendment, just because I feel like giving free legal advice tonight. I agree entirely with Councillor Bonner. I have lived in this community steadily now for 40 years, which is not as long as Councillors Turley and Thorpe. But I have watched the property market go up and down. I have seen the dramatic increases in value that were followed by the most precipitous decline in real estate values ever seen in this community, I think it's safe to say, in living memory. The real estate market is a funny creature. Regulations around rental, the lack of incentive, meant that for many, many years, this community did not have rental accommodation, multi-unit residential accommodation built, and that had disastrous effects on tenants and people who can't afford to purchase. At the same time, it has become very common that just because it's a condominium, depending on the rules of the strata, it doesn't mean it can't be rented. Indeed, many stratas are, and many people own stratas that are rented out. I appreciate that we are creating value for everyone who gets a rezoning here generally. They're not rezoning it out of some sense of Christian charity. They're doing it to make money, and that is the way of the world. But Councillor Brown's point is well taken, and Councillor Armstrong's point. There are people who wish to live in the neighborhood, who may wish to downsize and acquire a condominium, and if that's what the market drives, the market will drive it. And if it's rental accommodation will drive it. But right now, we are seeing a significant number of units of rental accommodation being built. And from a tenant's perspective, one can only hope that so many will be built that it will have a leveling effect on rents in the community. And vacancy rates will create a demand potentially for even reductions. I don't know that. But I don't think it is reasonable at this stage, when staff have made recommendations, and we've considered this carefully, for us now, as Councillor Thorpe says, to make a change on the fly. So I will be voting against this motion, and hopefully we'll follow with a motion to simply do what was the staff recommendation initially. Anything further? All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just trying to find where I am now through my notes. Third reading, thank you. But which? Thank you. That council directs staff to secure the community amenity contribution, road dedication, and statutory right-of-way to accommodate the future Wexford Creek restoration project.
Second.
Second. I'm going to let Councillor Bonner second it, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is rezoning application number RA 409-751 Halliburton Street. Again, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. As you mentioned, a rezoning application and a bylaw for council's consideration, which, if it ultimately adopted, would add office as a site-specific use to the subject property, which currently is zoned Local Service Center CC1. Your Worship, as outlined in the report, this is the opportunity for Coastland Wood Industries to move their office staff, which are currently on Robarts, move them down closer to the mall. This is something that they've been exploring with staff for off and on for, I would say, a couple of years now. We believe we found this opportunity to use an existing industrial building and adaptive reuse of that existing building, and support the rezoning application as presented.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-148, to rezone 751 Halliburton Street to allow office as a site-specific use in the local service center CC1 zone, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-148, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Brown. Councillor Gesselbrock, sorry.
Yeah, just a question to staff, Your Worship. In the for the rezoning, it was said that the developer would have a community space. I think this development is great for the south end, but there was a time limit on how long that community space would be available for 5 years. And I'm just curious what the reasoning is for the time limit on that, and if that's something that is usually put in place, and if it is necessary.
Your Worship, I'm not sure I would say that it's something we'd usually put in place, but again, this is kind of an unusual community contribution. There's something very specific in the building. In this case, I think it's the length of time that the applicants felt comfortable with, without knowing their long-term plans for the property. But also from staff's perspective, when adding this use to the property in the CC1 zone, I would note already allows for a fairly wide variety of uses. It allows for retail, medical office, restaurants. So it already has a fairly significant value in terms of zoning. And from staff's perspective, adding the one additional use of office had, I don't want to say minimal, but marginal lift on the land. And we believe that the 5-year proposal is consistent with the value inferred on the land through rezoning.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that Council direct staff to secure the amenity contribution and road dedication by way of covenant, should Council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Your Worship?
Yes.
I would just like to note that it's just past the 9 o'clock hour and there is a scheduled recess.
And what is Council's wish? Then we'll take a scheduled recess for 10 minutes. Thank you very much. We are recessed for 10 minutes.
There will be a new decorum statement read out at the start of each meeting to ensure proper decorum is taking place and to assist the chair in his duties. So the proper rules of order and the decorum will be as follows. There will be only one speaker at a time that will have the floor as directed by the chair of the meeting. There will be no interruptions or call-out comments while another person has the floor. Anyone speaking out without having been acknowledged by the chair will be found out of order. If that person does not refrain from speaking without having been acknowledged by the chair, then he or she will be required to leave. For the members of the public speaking, the comments need to be respectful and constructive. Discriminatory or defamatory comments or comments that are in the nature of harassment will not be tolerated, and anyone engaging in such communications will be found out of order. Some examples of behavior that won't be tolerated at a council meeting are as follows. 1. Harassment. In terms of comments about city employees, employees of the City of Nanaimo have a right not to be subjected to discriminatory or defamatory comments or personal attacks against their competency or character. All speakers must refrain from such comments about identifiable staff. Comments should be limited to issues regarding the city's policies or operations. Number 2. Section 7 of the Human Rights Code prohibits a discriminatory publication because of race, color, ancestry, place of origin, religion, marital status, family status, physical or mental disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or age. Discriminatory comments will not be tolerated. Number 3, defamation is publication about a person that tends to hurt that person's reputation. Defamatory comments will not be tolerated. Please stick to known facts and keep the dialogue respectful and constructive.
Are you tired of dragging the garbage out? They just don't make them like they used to. It's a saying that doesn't really apply to garbage cans. Yes, young man, you seem ready for a new garbage and recycling experience. Take a look at the new green, blue, and black carts right behind you. Yes, exactly. Oh, I see your confusion. I can fix it. Go ahead, give them a try. Pretty easy to roll, right? Did you know that a set of these carts will be delivered to every house in Nanaimo as a part of the new Sort, Toss, Roll program? It's designed to make it easy for you to sort your waste, toss it into the correct cart, and roll it to the curb.
3 carts will be assigned to your home, but the city actually owns them. This way, the city will maintain responsibility for repairing and replacing the carts when it's needed.
Wow, you really are happy about this. There are a few things you need to know before you start wheeling your carts to the curb. Are you ready? Great, let's get ready to sort, toss, roll.
Yeah!
Did you think that this was a silent video? Well, now that you've found your voice, why don't you narrate this next bit?
The new Sort, Toss, Roll automated curbside collection program is coming to Nanaimo in 2 phases. Phase 1 is being rolled out to central Nanaimo now. Sort, Toss, Roll will come to the rest of Nanaimo in the summer of 2018. Carts will be delivered and placed at the end of your driveway, yard, or curbside. This is how you should place your carts on collection days. An information package will be left for you, further introducing you to the new program, with information spanning from instructions on how to place your cart on different types of streets to options for cart upsizing, or details on what goes into each cart.
Wow, you really know your stuff. Tell me, why are there 3 colors of carts?
Well, this one is for organics, this one is for garbage, and this blue one over here is for any recyclables.
Very good. Now, what goes into the blue recycling cart?
Cardboard, plastic containers, milk jugs, cans, or anything that used to go into the yellow recycling bags.
Now, David, what goes into the green cart?
The green cart is for your organics, any compostable food, pizza boxes, or napkins. Anything that used to go into the old organics bin.
And
what?
I'll give you a hint.
Yard bird clippings.
Yes, the new green cart has plenty of room for grass and weeds. Now, what about the black cart?
Easy. That one is for garbage. Any waste that can't be composted or recycled. But what if the carts aren't big enough?
Well, the city of Nanaimo has an exchange program in place. Homes that have more demand for recycling and household waste can upsize their carts. That reminds me, anyone that has questions about the Sort Toss Roll program can call the hotline or visit our webpage.
The standard 240-litre blue recycling cart can hold 3 times the amount of recyclables as your yellow bag, and it won't blow away in the wind. The 120-litre green cart can hold 3 times as much as your old green bin, and the 120-litre black bin is about the size of 1.5 garbage bags. And now, you won't even need to buy those black garbage bags.
Are you going to get that?
I probably should. Take over for a bit, will you?
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks.
Hang on. Let's try this. Sort Toss Roll is a new way of doing away with waste. New trucks are a big part of the program and come equipped with an automated arm to lift, dump, and replace the carts on collection day. The trucks are efficient. Each truck has 2 compartments and can pick up both your weekly organics and your recycling or garbage. They are also fueled by compressed natural gas, so they are green too. And the trucks are safe. Our waste collectors no longer need to lift the cans manually. This means far less injuries on the job and happier workers. The new trucks are awesome. The arms can reach out up to 10 feet to pick up the carts. It is important you place them properly on collection day though, to make sure that your waste and recycling can be picked up. How you place your carts depends largely on the type of street your home is on. If your street looks like this, with a sidewalk divided and set in from the curb, place your carts like this. If your street looks like this, with a sidewalk and a curb as one, place your carts like this. If your street doesn't have a sidewalk or curb, place your carts like this at the end of your driveway. And finally, if you have a curbed sidewalk but can't place your carts behind the sidewalk because of a wall, ditch, or fence, place your carts like this in front of the curb. Always remember to place your carts 1 meter apart to allow room for the automated arm, and point the arrow on your cart legs towards the street. In the occasional neighborhood, there are other factors that may affect how you can place your carts, such as street parking or steep hills. The City of Nanaimo will find a collection solution for every situation. It may not look like it, but there's technology in the carts. Each cart has a digital ID tag, which tells the truck which house it belongs to and whether it's the recycling, organics, or waste cart, so that it gets dumped to the right compartment at pickup.
Contamination happens when things that can't get recycled get tossed into the blue cart. Styrofoam, plastic bags and glass can't be accepted at the curb. The automated sorting machine at the recycling facility cannot process them. This means contaminated loads of recycling end up being sent to landfill. So do your part and recycle smart.
Sort Toss Roll. It's easy, efficient, green, clean, and safe.
I was going to say that.
Go ahead then.
It's easy, efficient, green, clean, and safe.
That about sums it up.
David, time for dinner.
Don't worry, we've covered a lot today, and if people want to learn more about Sort Toss Roll,
call the hotline, 250-756-5390.
Come on, David.
I've got to go.
What was that number again?
250-756-5390.
The next item is rezoning application number RA 418-52 Victoria Crescent. Again, Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, a rezoning application of the subject property. At this point, there's bylaws for consideration that, if ultimately adopted, would amend the zoning bylaw to allow site-specific use of cannabis retail store on the subject property.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-144, to rezone 52 Victoria Crescent to allow cannabis retail store as a site-specific use in the Terminal Avenue DT4 zone, pass first reading.
Seconded? Second. Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Brown.
And I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-144, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Brown.
And I would move that council direct staff to secure the amenity contribution and BC Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch approval prior to adoption of the bylaw, should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is rezoning application number RA 420-140 Terminal Avenue. Again, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. Another rezoning application, again, bylaw consideration for first and second reading, which if ultimately adopted would add cannabis retail store to the subject property at 140 Terminal Avenue.
Councillor Brown. Oh, pardon me. Sorry, I'm just jumping ahead.
Yep. No. Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-144, to rezone 140 Terminal Avenue to cannabis retail store as a site-specific use in the Terminal Avenue DT4 zone, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman.
Your Worship, just one point of clarification. I believe Councillor Brown said 4500.144, and unless it's a typo in my annotated, I just need to...
145.
Yeah.
My apologies, Your Worship. If I did do that, which I'm sure I did, I correct that to 4500-145.
Seconded by Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Brown.
There's a lot of pressure on these, Your Worship. I have a critic on my left and a critic on my right.
Welcome to politics.
I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500-145, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to staff, as I'm fairly familiar with that area. My recollection in walking by there almost on used to be a daily basis, Sprott Shaw College has one section of the area that is kind of a play area for children, and I'm wondering if that is an issue.
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, certainly staff looked at separation and distances from daycares, licensed daycares, Councillor Turley, that was part of the criteria for siting of cannabis stores. So if there is facilities for minors on the subject property, I don't believe staff were aware of that or took that into consideration as part of the evaluation.
I mean, I can go by there tomorrow and have a look, or drop by tonight and have a look, but the last time I walked by there, it was still there. Now, whether it's probably not licensed, it's, I believe, for students that have children, that they can actually drop them off there while they're taking classes, is my understanding.
Mr. Lindsay?
Your Worship, I would suggest that if this is of interest of council, and I assume it is, that we'll seek some clarification and we could have that information available at the public hearing.
Thank you.
All right. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I thought I'd get in before Councillor Armstrong because this is one where I wanted to ask about the parking situation. I'm not as familiar directly with the site as Councillor Turley is, but I certainly visited it, and it seems to me that there's very limited parking in that area, and reading the staff report, that doesn't seem to be flagged as an issue. The wording is, store is not expected to negatively impact traffic volumes. My question would be, is it going to negatively increase traffic volumes and parking problems? So maybe if staff could just clarify their opinion on that for me.
Thank you, Worship. I think there's really two parts to that answer. And the first is, of course, the existing zoning allows for a very wide variety of uses already, and that could include outright retail stores, restaurants, or other uses which potentially would have high traffic volumes, high traffic generators. The second part is it's in our downtown, as part of our downtown commercial core area. The commercial parking is not actually required on site. So as a result, I'm certain that staff did not look closely at the parking, the current parking demands on that property.
Thank you.
Not working? Try it one more time. Too bad. It looks like I have Councillor Thorpe here forever, except he just changed to null. No, now he's gone.
What was almost, there it is.
There you are, Councillor Armstrong, well done.
Just a question also through you to Mr. Lindsay. Do we know if any of these applicants are currently operating or operated cannabis stores?
Your Worship, I know that staff have information on existing operating stores. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me this evening, but we could certainly be able to answer that question at the public hearing if interested.
That would be something that's important to me because I will not be supporting any that stayed open during the prohibition period. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Turley? Motion carries.
And I would move that council direct staff to secure the amenity contribution and BC Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch approval prior to adoption of the bylaw, should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Turley, motion carries. Thank you. The next is rezoning application number RA 422-111 Terminal Avenue. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. An additional application for site-specific amendment. The bylaw is included in Council's agenda this evening for your consideration, but in this case, staff are recommending against the application and recommending that Council deny the proposal. Specifically, as outlined in the report, it's based on the spatial recommendations that came out of the Cannabis Task Force and the separations from schools. The guidelines and the criteria recommend a 200-meter setback from schools, and in this case, the proposed store would be 150 meters from Pauline Hare Elementary, and as such, staff are recommending against the application.
Thank you very much. We do have two delegations. Joity? Grandam? Yeah. And please correct me. I'm not shy about being corrected if I've mispronounced. Forgive me. Jyoti? Jyoti.
Yeah.
Ms. Grandam, please introduce yourself. And you understand 5 minutes and 1 minute the light turns orange, please.
Okay. Hello and good evening. My name is Jyoti Gandam, and I would like to thank you, Your Worship.
Lean more into the mic.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Or
on my
bend it
tippy
down to you.
toes, so.
Or bend it down to you.
Okay, this works. Good? Okay, I'll start over. Hello and good evening. My name is Jyoti Gandam, and I would like to thank you, Your Worship and Council, for meeting with us this evening. Unfortunately, Armin, who was supposed to represent today, had a family emergency in New York, and due to that matter, we were hoping that if we could have an adjournment, because we have now gotten counsel to come and represent as well, and our counsel was kindly requesting if it was possible to have an adjournment and to come back in the next week or the following week.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it is council's agenda. Council can choose to make that motion and deal with this matter at the next council meeting. It might affect when and if you did give it 2 readings, if that was your choice, what public hearing it would go to, but that would be the only implication.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Motion to defer it to a later council date.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Justice is well served. You should hear both sides fairly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you.
And finally, liquor license application number LA 000135-units N and O, 11 Cliff Street, to be introduced by Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening, we're seeking a recommendation from council for an endorsement for a lounge on the subject property associated with proposed brewing manufacturing. This application has been subject to a previous council report. It was also included on your, I believe it was your last public hearing meeting, and it gave the opportunity for residents to submit any concerns. Staff have summarized that in your report this evening and are recommending that council proceed with a recommendation to the province to proceed with the issuance of the license.
Moved by Councillor Brown,
Yes, thank you, Worship.
seconded by Councillor Gesselbrock. Any discussion? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. In looking at some of the concerns that I've heard, as the outdoor portion of it, I know that the Swilana Lagoon area has a limitation as to what hours they're allowed to have a liquor license and live entertainment there because of the neighborhood concerns. And the Friday night and the Saturday night, if my memory serves me correctly, they have to be out of there by 11 o'clock. And I see on this one, it's till midnight, I think, on Friday and Saturday, if my memory serves me correctly. And I'm wondering if it would make sense to have the two, as they're both outdoor facilities, have the same requirements as far as close down time for the outdoor portion. They do have some indoor, which is not an issue.
Mr. Lindsay.
Certainly, council could make that part of your recommendation to the province if you felt that was necessary. I would note that the proposed hours are consistent with our existing liquor strategy for these types of facilities in the downtown core. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm familiar with the facility that Councillor Turley's referring to, but I believe it's consistent with the hours, if not reduced hours from what's available at White Sales next door.
Well, if I could answer that, if you don't mind. My concern is White Sales is basically indoors, and the only part that's outdoors is kind of covered on 3 sides, and there's a big building right across the street from it, so the amount of sound coming out of there is negligible. But I don't know, my concern is I don't know what the design of this outdoor patio is. And I do know that Parks and Rec do have a rule, because through Rotary we've had, like, for example, the beer garden for the Dragon Boat Festival, we have to be closed down by 11 o'clock, period, and on Saturday, Friday night and Saturday night. So we're happy to do that, of course, because we're getting on in years and we don't want to stay up late, but...
Sorry, Your Worship, thank you for the clarification. So the difference between the park, so staff didn't consider the requirements of the park, but more the requirements that govern the rest of liquor establishments within the downtown core, and this proposal is consistent with those guidelines.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Brown?
Yes, through you to Mr. Lindsay. Just building off of Councillor Turley's question, would the 11 p.m. be the noise bylaw?
Your Worship, the 11 p.m. in the park is what we were referring to. So I think the suggestion is that events in the park have to be shut down by 11, and I'm not honestly sure if that's the park's bylaw or if it's just a matter of practice for public events within the park. I'm not sure.
Your Worship, I can just note to Councillor Brown's point that 11 p.m. is the noise bylaw, just in general, that is when the bylaw comes into effect.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. We've talked about we want to revitalize downtown. That's a way of doing it. We hear common complaints. There's nothing to do after 6 or 7. Any vibrant city does have nightlife and activities, so I will be supporting it.
Thank you very much. Before I call for the vote, I think I can reflect Council's sympathy to the proponent we see is here tonight, who suffered a very untimely theft, and you have the sympathies of Council in the circumstances. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Bylaws. The bylaw status sheet is for information only, Ms. Gurry. And we have correspondence from the Office of the Mayor of the City of Burnaby, Mike Hurley, dated May 2nd, 2019, regarding expanding investment opportunities. Anyone care to make a motion? Councillor Gesselbrock.
Your Worship, thank you. Is this a motion to receive the correspondence or a motion to send a letter of support as requested?
Your Worship, so by matter of the letter being on the agenda, you have received it, so a motion isn't ultimately necessary for that. But if there was matter arising from the correspondence, now would be the time to make that motion.
I move to send a letter of support for this request by the City of Burnaby.
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I don't think I could support the motion as is without, I think, comment from our own staff.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say exactly the same thing. I can't support this until I have more information. Thank you.
For what it's worth, Councillor Gesselbrock, go ahead.
I'm happy with an amendment to refer this letter for staff review to come back with recommendations on if it's necessary.
I think that, Ms. Gurry, is more than an amendment, isn't it? Or am I being sticky?
Yes and no, Your Worship. You could, Councillor Gesselbrock could amend the motion that a letter be sent for support of the request once feedback and recommendations have been received from staff.
Or he could just withdraw the motion and we could just have a motion to refer it to staff.
That could be another one as well.
Okay, motion to withdraw.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Seconded, seconder agrees. Can we have a motion to refer this to staff for report? Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Sorry, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Having read the letter, I think this is an interesting proposition to investigate further. I think expanding the type of investments that a city can engage in, given the complexity of what's out there and different opportunities for investment and potentially investing in items that are closer to the community. I think this is a worthwhile area to support.
I appreciate Councillor Gesselbrock's support for putting money into the marketplace. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Notices of motion, Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Before I read my motion regarding the Department of National Defense lands bordering the city, I wish to be clear that it applies only to the lands as long as they are owned by the Department of National Defense. While it expresses a desire to see a certain outcome, the motion more so advocates for a process which I believe has been missed and which provides an opportunity for members of our community to voice their concerns and advocate for their continued use of lands which they have stewarded for years. In delivering this, I am arguing that while technically outside of our jurisdiction, it is the responsibility of municipal government to encourage dialogue and conversation with other levels of government around matters which impact our residents and the resolution of which stands to benefit our community. With that in mind, I move to direct that correspondence be sent from Mayor and Council to the Department of National Defence, requesting they convene a meeting with representatives of recreational user groups that have been using the Department of National Defence lands near Nanaimo with the intention of reaching a use agreement which works for all parties. Thank you.
Councillor Martman? Yes.
And
Goes on the next agenda. Ms. Gurry?
thank you, Your Worship. I would just love it if Councillor Hemmons could provide me that in writing. Thank you.
I believe she certainly will. Thank you. Any other business? None? Question period? Thank you very much. No questions. A motion for adjournment. Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much, everyone.